Tonight, we look at the freedom of the press. As we get all uppity about intrusions into the lives of the rich and famous, it seems we all want there to be restrictions on what is reported. The demise of the news of the world still chimes loudly as a self-sacrifice for the discovery of their dirty deeds. However, where will the line be drawn on what is allowed to be reported and what isn't? With a news channel broadcasting in the UK on Sky being under a very real threat of removal from the satellite system, have we seen the beginning of a more overt form of censorship, which will eventually ensure that alternative views of the current affairs are suppressed on our own shores? Has this been the plan all along, and the cult of celebrity has been the smokescreen to shut the prison doors behind us? They wouldn't do that, would they? Let's find out as we go on the edge. Hello and welcome to On the Edge. I'm AlexG, your presenter. This show is live, so this is your chance to interact. And here's Glenda to tell you how.
Text in on 86686, type the word EDGE, space, followed by a message, and standard network charges apply.
There we go. Well, my guest tonight is a journalist, geopolitical analyst, Patrick Henningsen. Patrick, welcome to the studio. Editor of 21st Century Wire and now associate editor at Infowars.com, the Alex Jones information emporium. So if we have a quick look at image one, this is the 21st Century Wire banner, which people will see on the internet if they go looking for the website. So how did that come about?
Basically, about, I would say in 2005, I started, I was always a big consumer of information. Mm-hmm. So I happened upon prisonplanet.com, among other sites, and started this process of filtering and learning and finding out what I thought was really on the money and what I thought was something I'll put to the side. And I started blogging, as millions of people doing it. And I started becoming good at it, surprisingly. I learned, taught myself how to write. I worked in public relations, I worked in corporate marketing. Right. So I had some idea of how to write, but to really kind of synthesize these really sophisticated events and geopolitical happenings that are going on in the world takes a lot of time. You have to really learn your history, and you have to figure out what's going on today, and then you have to take a little punt and try to guess what's going to happen tomorrow. And from this, I started 21st Century Wire. I launched it at the Copenhagen Climate Summit in 2009, and that was when I launched it. I did a whole series of stuff for Alex and Infowars there. And 2 years later, the traffic started increasing a lot, and I started getting mega hits. I got asked to be on shows like Russia Today, and then I got contacted by Alex and his team saying, do you want to come on board and write with us and help edit Infowars, which is a massive site, and it's got an incredible amount of news on it. So I thought about it for about a half a second and said yes. And so now I'm doing both, but most of my time is really with Infowars, the majority of my time.
So what was your trigger to start investigating what the alternative view was? What was the incident that made you say, hang on a sec, that does not ring out as anywhere near accurate to you?
Well, the thing that really kind of blew up for me was definitely was September 11th, and I was here when that happened. I was in London. But just watching everybody's reaction to it, and I knew about the Mujahideen's history with the CIA, just from my own reading and seeing documentaries and stuff like that. But even before that, I lived in a incredibly Arab-dominated neighborhood in London.
Right.
So during the Intifada and when all this was kicking off in Palestine, I got a little bit of a different view into my ear than what I was reading in the paper, in the Times, in the Murdoch press, for instance. And so it just got me thinking, it's possible that there's something different happening on the ground than what I'm seeing on the BBC, on CNN, on the Times, and the Telegraph, and the Sun, and News of the World. And in 2003, I got really involved in the anti-war movement.
Yeah.
Was on the street. I really tried to be active in that, in the peace movement. And that really, when I saw the tabloids, when you come out of your house every morning, you see them all lined up there at the newsagent, and it was absolutely incredible, the differences you can see. And I thought, wow, you know, the internet was kind of coming into its own in 2003, 2004, and when I was first able to, I jumped on and tried to get involved in the conversation. So a complete self-starter, and that's I wouldn't have it any other way. I started off at the bottom and kind of climbed my way up.
So what's been the most shocking thing that you've discovered that you thought, oh, come on, this can't be right, and then you investigate and find it really is?
The most shocking, you know what, a lot of times, and you can probably relate to this, sometimes you have to work on instinct.
Yeah.
You know, you can know your history, you can do your research, you can read thousands of books, but really, what's the point in being in journalism or being in investigation if you can't make a educated guess or a hunch, or take a punt on an idea? And the thing I took a punt on, and I was afraid to write about this myself because I didn't think I was qualified. So I put it all together and I sent it off to reporters at The Guardian, The Independent, and some of these newspapers. And I didn't believe this whole thing about extraordinary rendition.
Right.
Because when they repatriated a few of the British detainees from Guantanamo, those stories came out immediately, and that was the end of it. But these were like school teachers, people from normal walks of life that they just kind of picked up. And I thought, wow, they're flying people all over the world in Gulfstream jets, spending God knows how much money. You know, it could be goat herders, taxi drivers, farmers, unemployed Afghan sheep shearers. And I thought, there's got to be something more to this kind of international transit system. And then the reports came out about the amount of rendition flights in the UK at RAF Northolt and some of the other airports around this country. I don't know, a staggering amount of landings that aren't checked by customs, that aren't vetted at all. And so I thought, there's got to be some, and I knew there was a connection between the opium production in Afghanistan and the NATO occupation of that country. It went up about 1,000-something%. So there's got to be a connection between the war on drugs and the war on terror.
Right.
And so I did jump out a little bit in front of the curve on that and published a story about 2 years ago where the war on terror meets the war on drugs. And there was a plane that crashed in Mexico, in the Yucatan, I believe it was in 2007, with 3 tons of Colombian uncut cocaine on it. That same Gulfstream jet was used to fly rendition flights. The tail numbers matched, everything. Now, everybody out there, all your viewers can go and you can look it up and find this out yourself. I'm just somebody who combs through information and tries to synthesize and put it together. But we all have that ability. We have access to a fantastic open source information system right now.
Now, if we now have a look at image 2, and this is the old chestnut of red pill and blue pill, made famous in the Matrix movie. Now, you've got an interesting concept of how this relates to people.
Yeah, I think the old concept of red pill, blue pill, when Morpheus comes out with his hands and he asks Neo, you know, are you ready? You know, if you take the blue pill, forget about it, go back to your life, write software and stay in your flat. Take the red pill and see how deep the rabbit hole goes. I think in 2011, I think it's a case of everybody's taking 2 of each, or taking 1 of each, and just kind of seeing where they sort of settle after that. But definitely red pill, blue pill, the Matrix, amazing metaphor to looking at the world, looking at society, and in many ways we definitely have a matrix that we have to sift through. You know, we have something that we have to work through.
Yeah.
Especially living in a modern country like Great Britain or in a city like London. We've got an incredible amount of a facade that we have to navigate through. And in the media, it's even more so. It's layered upon layers upon layers.
And this sort of brings us to the perspective of who do you believe out there from the various news channels. And it's worth making mention, I think now, of Press TV, and that they're having a little bit of a set to with Ofcom concerning the fact that they've had their wrists slapped over various things. It seems a little bit clouded as to what's actually going on there. So, I mean, from your perspective, what have you heard, and what are the various views on that?
Well, basically, Press TV is under threat from Ofcom. So Ofcom is threatening to pull their license, and there's two different stories flying around, and I've tried to contact Press TV to get a kind of fix on the situation. And basically, the two stories is there's a irregularity with their licensing application, which they put down in 2007. It's taken 4 years to discover this irregularity. And the other thing is that they're in breach of the broadcasting code. Because of an American journalist who was accused of being a spy by the Iranian government, by the revolutionary government in Iran, of the Islamic Republic. He was imprisoned for 2 years, I believe. And Press TV is accused of making him read off a script just before his release, which is a breach of ethics, technically. So hence, they're under threat to have their license pulled. They actually have quite a good operation in West London, Northwest London. I've been down to the studios. I've seen George Galloway do his thing on there, and a lot of other well-known personalities from the UK have done shows there. But Press TV is it's the foreign arm of Iranian national television. And they have studios in America, they have studios in London, they have studios in Beirut. They have studios like all over the world. Now, they came out in 2007, 2006, 2007. Now, and people might say, wow, the Iranians, why are they doing an international 24-hour news network with documentaries and really emulating the BBC, the BBC model? And then when you watch Press TV, you're thinking, wow, I'm getting some really interesting stuff from these guys. I have no idea what Iran's central government's agenda is for their geopolitical strategy, but I mean, we do know that they're under threat, basically. And then a year later, Russia Today came out, which is another operation, even more smooth and more slick. And I think the West has had a monopoly on this kind of global media, syndicated media, America and Britain mainly. And they've had basically full run of the house for about 50, 60 years. So now these new players have come on, and basically what it boils down to, the networks, the newspapers, they are losing advertising revenue hand over fist. And they're losing viewers, they're losing ratings. Why? The reason is because people out there have got a real hunger for the truth, or something closer to it. Than what they're getting from the state-run organization like the BBC, CNN, which is essentially a kind of proxy arm of the CIA or the State Department, ABC, Fox, CBS, NBC. So Russia Today, Press TV, they're coming out and putting something really juicy on a plate for the viewers on a daily basis. They don't censor. I've been on a number of times. They don't ever censor anything I say. They don't tell me not to say this, don't say that. They basically checked me out, they checked out my writing, and they think, okay, he's okay, he's trustworthy.
I mean, it is worth saying that Ofcom actually haven't put it in black and white that they're doing anything more than slapping their wrists, which is the first stage along the process. And I mean, I have to sort of defend Ofcom in this situation, because they're under considerable pressure from the government, as I think a lot of people are aware of. And not only that, you have this very dark, secretive, strange organisation, the Media Standards Trust, sitting in the wings, waiting for Ofcom to effectively have a lobby coming up against them. So I think they've got a difficult job. And again, you've also got the situation that they will say that Russia and Iran are controlling to some degree, the outputs of these stations, and it's not actually being controlled from the UK. So it's a grey area.
Yeah, I mean, if you really look at it, I think the BBC World Service, or BBC News 24 worldwide, there's definitely got some, the Whitehall has definitely got some control over the BBC's party lines, which I call consensus reality. This is the consensus reality of this is what everybody thinks, this is how everybody feels, and this is how you should feel as we go forward with this issue.
Right.
And you know, Iran and Russia, I think they're a little bit more in the cowboy stage, where they're just out marauding with the news, whereas the BBC's got the establishment kind of voice behind it.
Got you.
But Ofcom definitely have a difficult job, because Ofcom there's real people working in Ofcom, real human beings, and they do get a lot of pressure, I'm sure, from the boys upstairs.
And we'll be talking about things like Occupy London and hearing from you after this break.
Welcome back to On the Edge, and we now have some comments from you, and here's Glenda to feed them to us. Glenda.
Yes, quite a few interesting comments, Alex. One Edge person wrote, what's happened to the journalists? What's happened to the real journalists? Surely they can't be happy writing the current drivel. Another gentleman has written in saying it seems like a prelude to an attack on society of loonies in the next few years, so that only a one-sided point of view is given. And then a couple of questions. Any comments on the Wall Street occupation? And another Edge viewer has written, is it true that Keanu Reeves' expiry date on his passport in The Matrix is 9/11?
Well, there's an interesting selection of them. I can certainly relate on that.
Matrix Keanu Reeves one. I think it's just a question of quickly Googling that and you'll find the image of the passport, and indeed it is the date of 9/11/2001. So there you go. You get your movie trivia here as well. So there you go. Patrick, the real journalists, are they happy about writing drivel, as it has been described?
Well, you know, it is amazing. There's some writers, I work with a couple of them, who are incredibly productive. I mean, the amount of stuff that these guys are cranking out daily is incredible. Now, if they're on salary with the Times or the Telegraph, they might have to do 2, maybe 3 articles a week. They're on 40, 50,000 pound a year. So definitely the workload on the brick and mortar mainstream media might be a bit less. The resources and the budgets are higher, even though a lot of these papers are running in the red.
Right.
But I think people really choose where they want to work, and you make, like any job, you make compromises. And if the perks in the job's good enough, and you know you get some notoriety from it, you'll stick it out for a few years and until you move on to find something better, or you have a job for life. So I personally would hate to be in that situation, because I don't want to have a job for life on that basis.
Sure.
And I did it for free. I would go back to doing it for free if that were the case, and do something else to subsidize the time that I spend doing what I do. But definitely, you got to have principles. Someone's got to have principles out there. And I think online, on the internet, there's some really solid people I really respect, because they absolutely do not budge on certain principles and ethics and morals and things like that. So.
And in terms of the people out there, the comment there, is this a prelude to an attack on what I describe as the loonies in society? So anyone with an alternative view being set up as the fall guys, if you like, being blamed for anything and everything that's coming down the tracks at us.
Well, I think that's always a constant threat. Definitely in America, you've got guys like Glenn Beck on Fox that are constantly, and Geraldo Rivera, who are constantly calling out 9/11 truthers and people who are constitutionalists and patriots as being dangerous. somehow to the prevailing paradigm. That's always going to be there. I think the establishment will always be sort of throwing stones down the hill to anybody who's trying to climb up. That's just normal. That's the same in business, it's the same in media, and any kind of structure, I think.
And that other comment we had, which was very timely, was about the Occupy Wall Street movement. We've got the Occupy London movement, and it's spreading around the world. But you've got an interesting sort of little nugget in terms of people who are getting involved behind the scenes with these Occupy movements. And I think one of them is called 350.org.
Yep, 350.org. This is a climate change activist group, UK-based, with a little bit of a global reach. They're obviously piggybacking on this Occupy London Stock Exchange, which is having a little bit of trouble getting off the ground, because obviously they're trying to occupy the land, which is the Corporation of London.
Right.
And obviously the Corporation of London, the city, as it's called, has a different police force. They've got a different modus operandi, and the law is can be interpreted differently in the city than maybe it would out in Boris Johnson's patch outside of the square mile. But the Naomi Klein, who great filmmaker, made some fantastic films, wrote some brilliant books. I read No Logo when I was in university. She's on the board of 350.org. So that's enabled them to get a front row seat at the Occupy movement. But when you're talking to this person in particular, I see it as a kind of desperate move by the climate change global warmists to one last ditch chance to have their voice heard. I personally don't believe in anthropogenic global warming, and I've interviewed and spoke to many Nobel Prize winning scientists, sea level experts. A lot of these things, you can go onto my website, 21st Century Wire. It's a great resource.
So what you're telling us is there is not a consensus, because Al Gore will tell you there is a consensus, the science is settled, you know. Again, we're getting back to the loonies. The loonies are the scientists who are saying there's nothing to worry about. Well,
the word consensus and science, this is oxymoron. The two are not, they do not coalesce. You don't have consensuses in science. By scientific definition, science is about discovery, and it's about then reaching one plateau and then waiting for someone to prove that you're wrong. There's no such thing as a consensus in science. It's a constant journey that mankind's been going on for the last 3,000 years to learn something. For one person like Al Gore to come forward and say, that's it, the discussion's over, there's no more debate, the science is settled, there's a consensus, and I have my 24 hand-picked scientists from the UN's committee to say that no one should question our consensus, which is that SUVs and carbon dioxide are heating up the atmosphere, is absolutely ridiculous.
But what's motivating these scientists to side with Al Gore if they're barking up the wrong tree?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, but I'll give you one little story that could hit the nail on the head. I spoke to one professor from, I believe, from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Brilliant professor there, and he's in the climate field. And he said, when I put my grant application forward to the US government to study penguins in the Arctic, I come back with a rejection. So I redid my application to say the effects of penguins affected by climate change, $4 million grant. Immediately. So it's really, it's more of a political thing, I think, global warming, and because it's connected to government, and governments are issuing out grants and giving money to universities for research projects, of course there's going to be politics involved. Politicians want to be seen to be doing the green thing.
Got you.
So.
Getting back then from that sort of basis of 350.org being involved with the Occupy movement around the world, we have a look at image 3 now. Now this is a representative of the Robin Hood tax. Now again, I don't know how many people have actually heard about this, but this seems to be, from what you're saying, something that the Occupy movement are getting behind. It's something that they're uniting with. So what is it? and what's the problem?
Well, the thing about the Occupy Wall Street movement, which has spawned off all these other Occupy movements, is the call for this whole thing to begin with was from a Canadian-based outfit called Adbusters, who did these really cheeky posters for years and so forth. But Adbusters is actually funded by some foundations, and also some of these foundations are connected with George Soros and big Wall Street people. So it's no coincidence that they called for an Occupy Wall Street, and Adbusters is now calling for all the occupiers to support a Robin Hood tax.
Right.
Okay, now look at the banking crisis right now. Okay, banks are looking for different ways to fleece government and to get their access to free money. Now, this is a perfect idea. It used to be called the Tobin tax, which was what they came up with in the Great Depression, to tax derivatives, financial transactions, stocks, and so forth. Now, what this is going to end up, hippies and really well-meaning people are going to think this could provide us with all the money we need to end third world poverty, to fight climate change, and to social programs.
Yeah.
And really, the Occupy movement should be thinking, why don't we cut spending first? No one's talking about that. What they want to do is another tax, which actually, when the banks get a hold of it, they're going to use it as a slush fund, as a backstop to give proper capitalization to investment banks. So basically, it's a little emergency fund for banks for bailouts.
Right.
This is what I believe it will end up becoming, if it, and it's a bit of a Trojan horse. It's the establishment putting a Trojan horse in there.
Not as advertised on the tin.
No,
basically.
not at all.
Right.
Not at all.
Something else you've noticed in the Occupy Wall Street movement is a technique which is dubbed as the people's microphone.
Right.
So how does this work? And again, what's the downside with this?
Well, I found it kind of, I was surprised, you know, because I'm born and raised in America, know the country well, know the people well, and I started seeing this in every single Occupy demonstration around the country. There's this thing called the people's microphone, and this is where one person gets up and says something like, "Hello, my name is John," and then 100 people are sitting around in a circle and say, "Hello, my name is John. I'd like to say," and everyone goes, "I'd like to say," and they just repeat after me, kind of thing.
Right.
The reason for this is because apparently New York municipal law is now that you can't use a megaphone.
Right.
But that law does not exist in all those other cities, yet they adopted this people's microphone. And it's the most incredibly, it's a bit like Lord of the Flies, where they pass the scene where they pass the conch.
Right. Yeah.
And you can't speak unless you have the conch. And they end up talking and repeating each other for long periods of time, saying very little and getting very little information out. And it's very hypnotic. But I don't think we have enough time to get in depth into the people's microphone, but I wrote a really good article that really went into depth with film clips. And there's an organization called Optor and Canvas.
How's that spelled?
OPTOR.
Okay.
Okay, they were a group that was funded by the State Department and worked with the CIA to overthrow the Milosevic government.
Right.
After the success of that, it's a professional revolution business consultancy. They took people out of Egypt 2 years ago and sent them back to seed the Arab Spring.
Right.
Tunisia. So there's a whole business now, professional consultancy. It's the revolution business. And of course, Canvas was right there at the beginning, and their top guys at Occupy Wall Street. So a little red light went off in my head when I saw this Serbian guy doing the people's microphone in Liberty Square. I thought, this is a professional agitator. There's more that meets the eye here. And they're funded by Open Society, George Soros think tank,
Right. George Soros comes with
Freedom House, and also the National Endowment for Democracy.
Right.
So these are foundations, who knows where they get their money, but they are putting money into these sort of organizations to do things that maybe the government or the CIA or the US State Department can't be seen to be doing.
Right.
So
Right.
and they're involved in Occupy Wall Street, so people should really look into
Quite
that.
literally, we're behind the veil on this. We've got a couple of minutes before the next break, and obviously one of the biggest stories has been Libya, the death of Gaddafi. So if we bring up image 4, just to sort of put a perspective on this, that's NATO and the new rebel leader. So how does this play out, Patrick? What have we got here?
Well, what we have here is 2 days ago at a big powwow over in the Emirates, the National Transitional Council, which is basically this group of rebels that was recognized by the United States back in February before they even won the war. They've now asked NATO to stay, surprise, surprise, in Libya. Now, I actually predicted that they would do this on October 4th on Russia Today Live, because it doesn't take a genius to figure out. NATO's not going to leave once Gaddafi is dead. There will be NATO troops there right through 2012, possibly UN blue helmets in some parts of the country. And I think, the problem with the Libyan rebels have done some incredible atrocities, which have been documented, mass graves, everything, brutal torture, rape, you name it.
And we have to play these against the bogeymen, and this is time for image 5. And of course Gaddafi's put in there now with Bin Laden and with Saddam. So it seems to be that it depends on who's backing you and at what time, what flavour of bogeyman you are.
Yeah.
And
each 3 of those people in that image have all cooperated and worked very closely with the CIA and the MI6 to help them achieve their operational goals, which eventually helped Britain and America achieve their foreign policy goals.
But this will sound like complete nonsense to the majority of the population, who will say, you're saying that American security services are working with the biggest agents of terror on the planet.
Well, they were only recently called agents of terror. Before that, they were CIA assets. And that's well documented. And you can access that information from a number of sources. Saddam Hussein was basically a strongman for the CIA to overthrow who was in power in Iraq in the mid-70s. Bin Laden was running parts of the Mujahideen and coming up with some cash to buy arms for the Afghani resistance when the Soviets were at war in occupying Afghanistan. And of course, Gaddafi was very, very cooperative with rendition flights and so forth with the MI6. So, you know.
That's where it comes from. And we'll be discussing more about the situation over there and indeed Obama in Africa after this break. Welcome back to On the Edge. You've been madly texting, and it has to be said, some of the texts you've sent tonight have been completely incomprehensible, so a little bit slower and we'll understand what you're talking about. Making sense of it all for us, here's Glenda.
Hi folks, quite a few questions. Is there a media and truth informer battle occurring? Are protests enough to stop the soft fascism that we live under? Another Edge viewer says, I don't believe the BBC, and a big up to Russia Today and Press TV. Another person is saying that they feel the BBC is definitely censored and feels that the BBC and other mainstream channels give a highly biased version of events. And another viewer wrote in and said that Gideon Osborne said that on BBC News that we will not contribute to the bailout of the EU, and that's because we have already paid out 200 billion to the EFS, the EFS being the European Financial Stability Fund.
Right, so quite a few on the sort of press angle, Patrick. So are we looking at a battle between the media, I assume the mainstream media, and the truth informers? Is this starting to sort of jack up as we go down the track?
I think inevitably it will. There will be a conflict. It's already happening, and really if you look at the amount of people that jump online first to get their news, they're losing millions of people a day. The difference between the mainstream media and the internet is the mainstream media is a linear operation. It sends you the information, it pre-digests it, and it gives it to you. The internet, there's so much choice there that you go to where the places that you want to go.
But how do you know which to believe? This is a question I get frequently.
Good question.
What's real, what's imaginary, what's the truth, what's lies, and how do you discern that?
Well, there's an very bizarre digital egalitarian sort of aspect to the internet, and I think I tend to go to places that that I go to and it really matches. It's a mirror of what I see and what I see in the world, and that's what I'm going for on the web. And also, the hits don't lie.
Right.
A lot of times, the most trafficked sites, the site Infowars.com is around number 500 on the whole of the internet.
Yeah.
We're ahead of ABC News and some of these other big things at certain parts of the year. So we're absolutely working on maybe a 1% another budget they're working on, but getting this massive audience. Why are people coming? People are, again, hungry for the truth. And so there is a conflict going on there. And if the internet remains free, it's a good thing. Freedom of speech is the most valuable right we have. It's number one. As soon as you lose freedom of speech, freedom of expression, you lose all of your rights are daisy-chained down the line to freedom of speech. It's very important.
Okay. And is there any way that protests are going to stop this soft fascism that seems to be emanating right across the world?
Well, I wrote an article which was Robin Hood tax. Is the Occupy movement marching off a globalist cliff?
Right.
And I think that there's a big danger that a movement can be co-opted.
Yeah.
And it's not a conspiracy theory. If you look at history, in fact, there was a whole thing about the police infiltrating activist groups, a whole load of stories last week. And it's been going on since the 50s and 60s. So they do put people in there who agitate, who try to steer the movement and the talking points a certain way. You know, at the end of the day, I think the best way, if you want to fight the world financial system, then you really should disengage with it.
Right.
Don't take out any credit cards. Don't take a loan out for your car. Don't take a loan for your plasma screen TV.
So it's all about commitment. This is real commitment. This is really not putting your money where your mouth is.
Exactly. That's powerful, and that will rock the system. That will rock the establishment. If they all did that, I think there would be some serious change.
And there's a very quick comment there about Osborne. We're not going to contribute to this new bailout fund. Truth or dare? Is there anything in that? Is he really going to say enough is enough when it's probably not down to him?
England's in a precarious position because it hasn't signed up to the single currency, and there's a huge mutiny going on with the Tories. Because the Tories have ordered, David Cameron's ordered him, and his whips have ordered everybody to vote, not to allow a referendum vote in this country. So this really goes against democracy. It goes against all the sort of principles that our parliament, the mother of all parliaments, is built on. So, as far as bailouts go, they just had a massive meeting today, agreed on a 50% haircut for Greece, which means forgiving 50% of the debt. But all they've done is basically move the debt around and created another, injected a whole load of capital there for the banks as well. That, you know, the problem is, if they bail out Greece, all Greece, it's like if I'm Greece and you're Germany, and over there is the central bank. Basically, you give Greece the money, they already owe that money to the banks. So that the bailout money just does a circle. It goes from one central bank, comes through Greece, they have to pay back all the interest, ends up in the same bank's hands at the end of the day. So it's really, people need to look at the whole creation of money, the whole idea of a fiat currency. And within that problem, you will find the solutions to this kind of financial problem we have, which is an endless cycle of debt and bailouts and debt and balance, and this will not be the last one.
So this is basically digging a hole in completely the wrong sandpit, really. Yeah,
and there'll be other holes dug in other sandpits. So I think people need to start looking at the fundamental aspect of how money is created, what our money represents, where it came from. It's a very interesting story. If you know the history of our money, you'll know exactly where we are today.
Right, we've got about 8 minutes now to cover the remnants of 3 topics here, which we were promising in our previews. So if we throw up image 6 now, and we're back to Gaddafi and terrifying scenes that we had of his demise. Here with the female bodyguard. So what's the inside track on Gaddafi in terms of what's been going on? I mean, people will say, who are the opposition who have taken over? Who were they? Who are they?
Well, the Rebel Transnational Council are basically, it's a ragtag group of, few of them are Al-Qaeda mercenaries, and a lot of the original Al-Qaeda came from this one town in Libya.
Yep.
And that you can look up. That is documented. The Al-Qaeda mercenaries. I've seen Pakistani faces on the news. I've
So
seen.
if we have a look at image 7 now, in terms of who's leading all this, who's this guy? What's the
This
tale
is.
with him?
I have trouble pronouncing his name, but he is the leader of the National Transitional Council. Now, the
Right.
people of Libya did not choose these people. This is mainly a collective from the Benghazi sort of area, who basically are backed by the UK, by France, by the US,
Yep.
and Qatar. Qatar already admitted they had hundreds of troops on the ground.
Yep.
Total contravening of the UN resolution, as if we're playing within the UN rules. We're not really, but it is a contravening of the UN resolution. Boots on the ground, heavy artillery. US and Britain might have boots on the ground as well.
And in terms of actually who's fighting out there, here's image 8. So,
Have you ever seen that film Wag the Dog?
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
this is Libya is the original Wag the Dog conflict. Basically, what happens in some of these, they have these ragtag sort of farmers and people and just giving them guns. There's no way they could defeat any kind of standing army. Okay, they have the air cover of NATO, which is powerful, but even with the air cover of NATO, there's no way they could win the war.
Right.
So what they do on a lot of the media opportunities is they will put these guys on the guns. If you watch them fire some of the heavy artilleries, it looks like they don't know what they're doing. That's because they don't.
Right.
The hardcore Al-Qaeda guys,
Yeah.
they move them out of the scene, and they're all Saudi, they're Afghani, they're from Egypt.
So they're not even from the country that
A lot of them
allegedly
are.
fighting for.
Watch the BBC, watch CNN, watch the news clips of the rebel fighters. These are not Libyans.
Right.
Not all of them anyway.
So if we quickly turn to Syria, we've got image 9 now in terms of Syria. This is, I believe, Bashar al-Assad.
Yeah.
Who's he? Why is he important and what's going on?
Well, Bashar is the head of the ruling government right now in Syria. His father was president or leader before him. Okay, the West are all over this guy. Is the next brutal regime that they want to take down.
Okay.
Russia and China vetoed a UN resolution for sanctions against them. And as you know, sanctions is the first step. First comes sanctions, then comes a UN resolution, then comes the no-fly zone, then comes the insurgency, then comes the bombardment, then comes the regime change, and then comes the rebuilding of the country and the contractors and the occupation, and then comes the IMF at the end to put the country into debt. Now, Syria's a solvent country. Libya was a solvent country, no debts,
Right.
profitable business. And what really these, I mean, we could go into real detail about this, but this is about bringing Libya, bringing Syria, bringing Iraq, bringing Iran under the globalist system.
Right.
Which is our banking system, which is our sort of debt system, so they can be messed up like Greece and Portugal and Ireland and Spain.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Now, in image 10 now. Now, this is Tunisia. So, how does Tunisia play in all this?
Well, the interesting trend is the Arab Spring. We all remember the Arab Spring. And everyone's saying, oh, this is a grassroots awakening and so forth. It wasn't totally grassroots. A lot of this was engineered and very carefully engineered for years from outside. Now, what's happened in Tunisia is they've opted for an Islamic government with Sharia law. Libya is going the same way. Now, Libya, funny enough, Libya and Syria are two of the only real kind of secular countries in the Arab world. So they don't have the Saudi Arabia kind of society where it's completely Sharia. Now, why the U.S. And Britain are traditionally, there's always an extremist regime that follows when they do their thing. So, and a lot of that is divide and rule. That's an old British colonial tenet. You want to get the sectarian minorities fighting against each other so you can have troops in there. If everyone's happy and peaceful, there's no need to occupy.
Gotcha.
So-
And in terms of this expansionism, we're talking there about the Middle East. Now, if we bring up image 11, now we see an interesting little wrinkle. Obama has actually moved forces permanently into Africa, I
Yeah.
believe. So what's the background there?
Well, it's U.S. is 2 weeks ago is sending 100. They say 100, although it's documented there were special forces troops there before that, right into the Bush years, into Uganda to fight the Lord's Resistance Army. This is a kind of Bin Laden-esque kind of Joseph Kony character. He's been around since about 87. But the only problem with this is, I mean, look, in Libya, NATO came in and financed and supported a rebel army to overthrow Gaddafi. And what they're doing in Uganda is the opposite. You've got Museveni, who's a president for life. He's been president for 25 years. European Commission on Elections wasn't quite sure whether his last election was legitimate, but they upheld the thing anyway. So Obama's kind of helping a dictator stay in power by snuffing out the rebellion. It's the opposite of Libya.
And image 12 is a logo of an organisation called the US AFRICOM. So what's their role in this?
Okay, this Obama sending troops into Uganda. AFRICOM is the stepchild of the Project for a New American Century.
Right.
Which was Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, Dick Cheney, George Sr. Okay, AFRICOM is the subset of that, which is the African kind of subplan under PNAC, which is for a U.S. military dominance across the global region from Asia to Africa.
So if we have a look at image 13, I think that's where we're going on that. So this is the grand plan that has effectively come out of PNAC.
Yeah, these are, you have conflict zones.
Right.
And it's very important, and the one word, if your viewers are going to learn one word today, our word for the day is destabilization.
Right.
Very important word when you're talking about running an empire. And destabilization basically justifies you to have an incredible amount of military bases and troops and so forth overseas, and U.S. and British companies and French companies running contracts to do certain logistical things in those countries. And basically what it is we've outsourced all of our manufacturing economy to China and India. We've got nothing left. The only thing we've got left is to farm out these places like Africa to launder our money overseas, and that's what the dollar is. Without all these wars, the dollar would collapse.
Crazy stuff. Patrick, thanks very much indeed. The clock has beaten us again, so that leaves me to say, don't forget, you now have the ability to subscribe to this channel online and receive it on any compatible computer around the world. That's, of course, local censorship willing. Now, you can find out more at www.edgemediatv.com, and subscribers will have access to exclusive features as they come live. And so now, it really is under the radar, around the world. You've been on the edge.